Johnson, and I'm going to be talking about the Daleks performing Jedi mind melds. I will admit, and my wife will tell you, that I'm a jerk. I really am. And when I came up with this talk title, I would argue that I probably giggled for 4 or 5 days. So I was so excited it got accepted because it was like, no, I have to do this talk somewhere. I have to be able to say Daleks performing Jedi mind melds. And the idea is this is based, the entire talk, and I've got some slides, but the reality is I'm just going to discuss my thought process around this. I will also say that due to my setup, I can't see Discord. So if you have questions, I'm going to try to pull those at the end. It's just I'm technology challenged. So, but that's what we're going to do. And yes, I'm going to warn you that there are going to be graphics like the, oh my God, it's R2-D2. I loved him in Star Trek 1. That's on the title slide. I think, like I said, I giggled for a few days. And then I asked internally at Secure Ideas, I said, hey, everybody, you know those pictures where they combine a whole bunch of nerd stuff to basically upset people? I want those. Any of those pictures you can find. And Nathan, Eric, and Jason jumped on this to share pictures with me. And this one, this is actually a T-shirt you can buy, I guess. One of the guys in the office, he actually built a life-size R2-D2 that's remote control, and he has this shirt. I don't know who gave it to him, but I think it's awesome he has it. So a little bit about myself before we get started. Like I said, I'm Kevin. I've been Kevin for 47 years. I've been Kevin Johnson for 18 less than that, so you can do the math. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I do not have COVID. I just have a cough that's kicking my butt. I am the CEO, which is another term for head nerd here at Secure Ideas. We've been around since 2010, which I'm actually really excited about. This year, August, was our 10th anniversary. And for a company that was started by accident, I think that having 22 staff members and 10 years under our belt is, I'm not going to say impressive, but I'm excited about it, right? So we are a penetration testing company. If you don't know us, come out to SecureIdeas.com. We are the professionally evil people. That's our slogan. It seems to be pretty popular. My favorite part of it is I hate stickers. I don't know what it is about me. I just don't like stickers. But years ago, somebody said, make a sticker that just says professionally evil, and I want one. We were looking for swag and stuff like that. So we said, okay, sure, fine. So we've made stickers. We've given them out for years. And my favorite part of the stickers is very often we'll be teaching a class. That's one of the things we do. We teach a lot. We will teach a class and we'll hand out the professional evil stickers. We'll give them to people. And people will put them on their laptop. And it's like, hey, don't you work for a competitor? Yeah, yeah. Isn't that your work laptop? Yeah. And you're okay putting our logo and slogan on your work laptop? And the answer I always get back is, yeah. And the best part is, very often we'll get a call from somebody that says, hey, I would like a penetration test. I would like to sign up for Scout. I'd like training, whatever. And we'll say, okay, great. Where did you hear about us? And they'll say, oh, our pen testers last year had your logo on their laptop. So thank you. I'm also an IANS faculty member. I'm a course author and instructor. Used to write for SANS, stopped doing that, stopped teaching there, but now I teach at industry events. I do private classes. We also just released our catalog for next year, so I'm excited about that. I'm an open source fanatic, I think is the right way to put it. I'm the original creator of Samurai WTF, still maintaining that. We just did our 5.0 release, which is crazy. Samurai is actually older than Secure Ideas, which is nuts. We had our 10th anniversary last year for Samurai. I'm a member of OWASP. I'm actually just recently made the projects committee vice chair, a new committee in OWASP. I think that might have been a mistake because it's actual work I have to do. And I have to say, and the pictures show it, I am a member of the 501st Legion and the Rebel Legion. We are a costuming group that raises money for charity. So we build screen accurate costumes like a Chewbacca costume, the Darth Vader there, the Clone Trooper, and then we wear them to raise money for charity. And because we're nerds, right? We like to wear fun costumes. So if you have any questions about that, we can talk about that later if you would like. But let's talk about the mind melds, the Jedi mind melds that we're going to do. There's 3 sections to this talk. One is we're going to talk about why I think this is important. Second, we're going to talk about what the issues are and the problems that I've seen, and then some solutions for it. And I'm hoping that those solutions will be helpful to people. Okay, because I actually think this is a really, really important topic. This is one of those things that I see us fail at day in and day out. And I want to be very clear. I want you to notice the we I said there. I am one of the people that fail at this problem. I am one of the people that communicates badly. I'm working on it. And I think that that's all that any of us can do is work on it, but we have to do that. If we don't work on solving this problem, we're gonna have a bigger issue. I threw this slide in here, yes, because I wanted to have a picture of Princess Leia in a Star Trek costume, but really because I think we all know that security is critical. I don't believe that there's anybody at this conference that doesn't believe security is an important topic, right? We can say that, but we can also prove it because we are finding the release of new vulnerabilities every single day, constantly. We hear about the next greatest thing, the next thing with vulnerabilities with logos and graphics. I know this has been going on for a while. It's one of those things that I just don't understand. I don't get it. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying I don't understand it. I've said this for years and nobody's taken me up on it. I'm waiting for the first vulnerability that has its own jingle or theme song. I'm hoping that we can get that at some point soon, but you know, whatever. But we're also hearing about breaches, right? Everything from ransomware going crazy to people actually compromising systems and breaking applications. And let's be blunt, I do it, right? As part of my job, I'm actually doing it this week. I'm working with a company. They're a business service company. I'm being vague on purpose. 1, because we have non-disclosure agreements, and 2, because they're my customer and they may be listening. But we've been working with this one company, this one client for years, and yet we still find vulnerabilities in their applications. And I guarantee you that's not unique, right? I can pick on this one customer, and I can do that because they're friendly. We've had a good relationship. We try to help them and work with them, and so they know that when I say, man, that vulnerability we found last year when we tested you still exists this year. They know I say it because I want them to get better. I don't pen test because I think hacking is awesome. I do think hacking is awesome. I tell people all the time that I have the best job in the world. I get to come in, break your stuff, tell you you suck, and then I go home. I don't actually have to fix anything, right? Man, that application is in awful shape. How could you possibly push that to production? Goodbye. Have a nice day. I don't fix. I don't remediate. I recommend. I can help you understand what the fixes are, the remediations are, but I don't do it. And the reason I don't do it, just to be very clear, is because when we formed Secure Ideas, we discussed whether or not we wanted to offer the service of fixing stuff, and we said no, because we think that it's a conflict of interest. Right? If I say to you, this is bad, it's broken, it sucks, but you know what? Don't worry. For an extra $20,000, I'll fix it. Oh man, isn't that great? right? All of a sudden we lose credibility. We lose the ability to say that we are only recommending the things that we believe are good, only the things that we believe are actually important for you to do. But why can't we fix this? I don't know about you, but I started in IT professionally in 1991. I'm old. I'm an old, fat, lazy guy, right? Plain and simple. And when I graduated high school, because I don't have a college degree, and I'm not bashing college degrees, they're good for the people who want them and need them and whatever, right, Bill? But I don't have one. When I graduated high school, I joined a company with something that we would call a startup today. But back then it was just a job, right? Startup wasn't a term that we knew in South Florida, I guess. I don't know. And I was a developer for them. I was running their network, and I was running their bulletin board system. If you really want to feel old, we had a 12-line bulletin board system running out of an office in Delray Beach, Florida, running, oh my gosh, Galacticom BBS. I'm old. I said that already, but it's true, right? And so we ran this system, and we built code, and we released software for customers. Basically, we did development for power companies. We wrote controller software for their hardware. Now, I don't know if you can do the math, but I can. And 1991 is almost 30 years ago. Okay, almost. Couple months, and then it is, right? So almost 30 years ago, I was writing software for power companies. Okay, I work with power companies today. A couple of years ago, we were on site at a power company, and they were running the software I wrote almost 30 years ago. Now, I would like to tell you that I am the smartest developer you will ever meet, and there is no way possible that I have vulnerabilities in code that I wrote. Notice I said I would love to tell you that. It would be a lie. It totally, bluntly, plainly, and honestly would be a lie. And yes, I said honestly it's a lie, but I don't know, oxymorons, jumbo shrimp, military intelligence, whatever, right? I know that the code I wrote almost 30 years ago sucked. I know it. I know that there are things we consider today basic architecture decisions and foundational concepts that I had no understanding of or thought around. I wrote my code, I published it, I pushed it to the system. Our software development lifecycle was Bob and I. Yes, the guy's name was Bob Morris. He had nothing to do with the Morris worm, as far as I know. But his name was Bob Morris, and he ran the company, and I was the young nerd he hired. And the two of us would write code, and we'd talk about it, and we would discuss things, and we never talked about security. We never talked about communication protocols. We never talked about how to ensure our code was formatted well, at the very least. Never thought of those things. Never talked about them. Now, you may say, well, Kevin, that's because you were a jerk and an idiot. And you know what? I'll go with that. I have no problem with that. But the reality is that I meet with companies today, I talk to customers today that they still don't know the things Bob and I did not discuss or work on almost 30 years ago. So why can we not fix this? Because I know we've tried. I know we have things like I am the cavalry, and I am this, and I am going to do public disclosure, and I'm going to do that. We've got the, I just read an article about PHP being removed from the internet bug bounty due to a lack of conversation. And I'm not going to argue either side of that one. But if we're still working on this, if we're still pushing for this, why can't we fix it? Because the reality is we are fighting the same things today that we were fighting in 1988, okay? And I want to be very clear, I'm not bashing SendMail here. But I found it interesting that the very first bug track ID was for a SendMail vulnerability in 1988. The very first one, bug track ID 1. And in July, for the people here, the date format is year, month, day, just to be very clear. In July of 2020, SendMail has a security bug that they fixed. So are you telling me that SendMail didn't know about security? I mean, we can make that joke, but it wouldn't be fair, because I know for a fact that people I've worked with that deal with SendMail, that work on SendMail, whatever, they think about security. They consider security. So why are we fighting the same battles? And in my opinion, and the reason for the talk title, the reason I came up with the name of the talk title is because we don't know how to communicate risk. We don't. We fail at communicating. And yes, I know the tweet is old, but I feel like this tweet is such a great example of how we don't know how to communicate risk. So CVSS, something I've railed about for years. If you have not heard me rant, you're not going to hear me rant today. Okay, you might hear me rant today. We came up with this CVSS thing. Oh, it's a common vulnerability scoring system. Okay, great. Except I can put in and answer all the questions correctly for a simple cross-site scripting attack that has a score, a base score, and I understand how temporal scores work, a base score of 9.3. I can do the same exact equation for a remote code execution bug that gives you the ability to run commands on the back end, and it'll get a low score. Because, and I understand the difficulty they have of coming up with a scoring system. I get that, okay? But we have this CVSS thing that has failed us for years, and we just keep updating it. And then we have things like Ibrahim Balik. I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, right? But here's what he tweeted out a few years ago. And yes, I know it's old, okay? But Apple, this is definitely not a hack attack. I'm not a hacker. I do security research. Now, I want to point out, he didn't tag Apple, right? He didn't tell them directly. He didn't follow their disclosure process. Whether you agree that their disclosure process is good, bad, or indifferent, he didn't do any of that. He released a tweet, said, hey, I'm not hacking you. This video he released was of him exploiting a bug in their developer network that took their developer network down for quite a while. The same guy took down, if I remember correctly, Sony, IBM, and somebody else. I don't remember all of them, right? And we can have the debate about security research or whatever. But the reality is, if you reach out to this guy, and you can't do it on Twitter anymore because his account's suspended, I guess that's a common thing nowadays. When you reach out to him and talk to him about it, he saw nothing wrong with this being the way he would communicate, right? And again, I'm not debating what he did. I've got my opinions. I've made my opinions clear over the years. What I'm talking about is how we communicate that risk. Is somebody at Apple communicating the risk of some guy in Turkey tweeting about a vulnerability? I don't know. I would hope so. I would assume so, okay? But we don't know. So let's talk about the issues themselves, okay? And I've broken these issues into 4 categories, 4 types of communication failures that we see, okay? And I'm gonna talk through what they mean. I'm gonna try to give you examples that I've seen of places we fail at it, and then we'll talk about how we can solve it, okay? How we can fix these 4 issues, okay? The first one, language. I love these movies, but I really am a nerd. And every bit of me wants to know. I'm hoping you all are cringing at the crossover pictures I'm doing. But one of the primary reasons that we see communication failures is language. And I want to be very clear, I'm not talking English, German, Russian, Chinese. I'm talking about the way we describe what we do, how we talk about it, the language that we use. And I'll give you some examples, okay? We use more acronyms than the military. That may not be true, but it feels that way, right? Everything we do is an acronym. Hell, we have an acronym for acronyms. TLA, 3-letter acronym, right? We are redundant with acronyms. GNU, SSL, TLS. What's the difference? They're different acronyms, right? And we use these things as if everybody knows what they are. And not everybody does. And let's be very clear, we think they do. But if I come to you and say, man, the TLS configuration of your system is bad, right? What am I talking about? What configuration do I mean? Now, you can assume that I'm talking about transport layer security. And within context, I probably am, okay? But do you know, what about saying SSL? Secure socket layer, right? And I can play this game. We can talk about acronyms, right? I remember back when I was at InGuardians, we were working with a customer and we were scoping a job. And the customer kept referring to all of the TCP hosts that they had. And I felt that that was a weird way to say it, right? But okay, we were talking about a network pen test and they were talking about the TCP hosts. And well, the TCP hosts this, and we've got 27 of those TCP hosts, and when we got these 37 other TCP hosts, and okay, great. We're asking questions, and they're answering questions. They keep talking about TCP hosts, and we keep counting them as network hosts. And then it turns out that for that organization, TCP wasn't transmission control protocol. It was an internal application, and I don't remember the name of the application. I'm sorry, but it started with T, C, and P. And what they were discussing was an application test. What we were discussing was a network test. Those are different, right? And the miscommunication was really because nobody broke down and said, hey, you keep talking about these TCP hosts, what are they? And let's be blunt, they didn't know what they were asking for. They were an ignorant customer, okay? And I don't mean that as an insult. Ignorant just means they don't know, okay? They didn't know what they were asking for. They had been told we have to have a penetration test. So they came to us, said, hey, I want a penetration test of these TCP hosts. And we said, great, we can do a pen test of those TCP hosts. They wanted us to address the application. We scoped testing the network. Now, we caught it before we started the work. Why? Because we wrote up an SOW, we sent it over to them, and they asked more questions. They kept asking about OWASP. Okay, that's interesting. Why are you at? And that's when we found out they were talking about applications. And it was because they were using an acronym that we didn't know. And we assumed it meant what we thought it meant. And let's make it even worse, right? Because I've got these 4 items. We have the organization that, and that could be the company, that could be the government agency, but I'm using it here as the organization of people talking about this system, the people who are responsible for security, the people who are responsible for the business, all working together, which means that that one or more of those boxes can be a third party, okay? Which makes it even more confusing because third parties have their own language and their own internal stuff and their own language that they use. Do you know how many times I've been on a call with somebody and I've referred to a pen test and had the customer say to me, what's a pen test? Didn't you want a penetration test? Yeah, I do. Oh, that's a pen test. Yeah, because I shorten it when I say it because I'm lazy. Okay, and so we have this problem where we use different languages, and that problem actually can cause more issues, right? Because when we start to discuss things, when we start to discuss what the solutions are, the remediations are, we have to make sure that we're speaking the same language. Okay? We see this fall down constantly. And sadly, a lot of times we see people react angry or insulting or aggressive when that communication fails because we're using a different language, right? We actually see people start to bicker and argue or one of the things we see all the time, both on the penetration test side, the business side, and the technology side, is that you assume that the person on the other side doesn't understand because they're dumb, not because they didn't understand the language. Something I've seen a lot, and this, I said I wasn't speaking about spoken languages, but I think it's a good example. How many times, to the point where it's a stereotype in sitcoms, right? How many times do you hear somebody who has a very strong accent talking to somebody who to you does not have an accent? Let's be very clear. Perspective is important in this example, right? But how many times do you hear somebody, they have a very strong accent, and so the person speaking to them assumes they don't know, they don't understand. Oh, sorry, oh, you have a strong accent, you must be an idiot, right? And what I find fascinating about that is, let's be very clear. If somebody has a very strong accent because the language they're currently speaking is not their primary language, that means they're already smarter than I am because they know 2 languages. I barely know English. Yet, because of the way they speak, because of the language they're using and the words they leave out or they say wrong, the emphasis is on the wrong syllable, we assume they're dumb. The same exact thing happens between the business, security, and technology, right? How many times have you heard a security person say, those users are idiots? They don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're doing, right? We hear it all the time. We see it all the time. How many times do you hear IT people say, ID 10 error, ID 10T error, keep CAC, problem exists between keyboard and chair, right? Let me be clear. The business is talking about you the same way. The project manager is talking about you the same way. The help desk person, the customer support person, the manager is talking about you the same way you're talking about them. We have to stop it. The next thing we have to do is have an understanding. This is one that drives me crazy. Understanding is one of the most critical parts of communication. If you and I don't understand what we're talking about, and I don't mean, do you know what HTTP 3.0 is? What I'm talking about is, do you understand everything about this system that you're complaining about, right? I see this a lot, especially from security people that don't have a background in IT or the business or whatever, right? And I'm not demeaning anybody here. I'm not trying to gatekeep or yell at people, but we see a large number of people that have graduated from something, whether it's high school, college, OSCP, I don't care what, and they're a pen tester. And you ask them, have you ever built a server? No. Have you ever built code? No. What's your background? Well, I went to high school and college, and now I'm a penetration tester. Great, okay, cool. And you find a vulnerability. And do you understand what that vulnerability means to the organization? Do you understand what that vulnerability means to the work effort for the IT people that have to implement your fix? One of my favorite examples of this is the Equifax breach. And yes, I know, old example. Struts had a deserialization issue. The bug was known about, patch was not available yet. And Equifax was compromised. Maybe the patch was available, I don't remember, right? And security went gleefully down the path of victim blaming. why didn't they patch? And I had somebody say to me, let me be very clear, there's lots of somebodies, but I had somebody say to me, all Equifax had to do was patch. And I said to them, have you ever patched struts? No. Have you ever been part of a Java application at an enterprise level being built on a framework like struts? No. Okay, so how do you patch struts? Well, you apply the patch. And the person stopped. And I said, you really don't understand the development lifecycle, do you? Well, why does it matter? It's just a patch. But it's not just a patch. And I want to be very clear. I'm not saying it's okay that Equifax was breached. I'm not saying it's okay that vulnerabilities exist and that Equifax hadn't fixed it. I don't know anything about their internal workings and what process they were following, right? But I do know that applying a patch to struts is not the same as clicking Windows Update. You have to apply the patch in your development environment. You then have to modify any of the code that doesn't work any longer because the new version of struts changed the framework calls. There was a reason companies were still running the old framework. Again, not saying it's okay, not saying it's excusable. I'm saying that we don't understand their processes, their reality, which we'll talk about in a bit, about how they fix that. Then you have to run that fix all the way up the pipeline. Development, performance testing, SIT, integration testing, staging, QA, production. And I want to be very clear, I listed a whole bunch of environments. I have no idea if they have. I do know organizations I've been at have had them. I know that I was the Webster administrator at a company that our development environment, every single development team had 3. They had unit, sit, test, perf, stage, UAT, prod, A, B, and C. And everything had to go through all of them. Can you imagine what the process would be to patch struts in that organization? How to get that organization up to the version that wasn't vulnerable to the deserialization attack? I can imagine it because I was there when they upgraded other frameworks similarly. I know the process. I know the amount of effort. And let's be very clear. We can make this easy. Fix it. Okay, do you have the budget? Do you have the time? Do you have the resources? Are you going to affect the deadlines on everything else we're doing? It doesn't matter. It's security. It's important. Yeah, it is. Do you understand that security does not make anybody money just because they're secure? Okay, it's true. I'll talk about my company. We have secure in our name. Our entire job is to assess other people's security and tell them where their problems are and teach them how to do exactly that, right? Yet, nobody in 10 years of business, nobody has ever come to Secure Ideas and said, Kevin, here's what we're going to do. We've decided you're secure. Now, I want to be very clear. My example, I'm saying they decided I'm secure. I'm not saying it. I'm not jinxing that one. Because I'll tell you, I'd like to believe we're as secure as we can be. But I also know there's a lot of people smarter than I am, right? It's not a challenge. But nobody has ever come to me and said, Kevin, I think you're secure, so here's $1 million. Nobody has said, I think you're secure, so let me pay you money. No, what they say is, Kevin, I'd like to pay you money for a class. Are you secure? Because I want you to be. I want you to think about that security. But really what I'm paying for is the knowledge I gain in that class. Or, hey, I'd like a pen test. I'd like vulnerability assessments. I'd like you to test my applications and work with my developers in an advisory role. That's what they're paying me for. They would like me to be secure while I do all that stuff. And they give me stupid spreadsheets to fill out for SIG questionnaires. I've got customers that every time a vulnerability is announced in the news, I get an email that says, Kevin, have you addressed this in our systems that you maintain for us? Meaning the portal we run, the training environment we run, right? And I get to give them an answer as to how I've addressed that vulnerability in my own systems. So they care about security. Are we just talking past each other? I use the example of social media. I see it all the time. I do it all the time. I post something, people assume they know what I mean. I assume they knew what I meant. The two of us believe something different about what I meant. And we talk about it. It's like, oh, that's not what I said. Well, it's what you wrote. No, it's how you understood what I wrote. Or I wrote it that way and I meant it some other way, right? We talk past each other constantly. I see this very much in security, right? How many times have you ever worked as a security person with a developer and told them about a vulnerability that they needed to take account? Did you share with them your understanding of the problem so that they could understand the problem? One of the things we see quite often, we will write up a report, and I will be blunt, I believe that our reports are very good at explaining what a vulnerability is, what it means, how you find it, and how you fix it. And if you want, we have a knowledge center up on our website that you can download our sample report. No issue, you don't even have to give us your name to download it. Just click the link, download, and you get a PDF that has no malware that we put there. I have to say that because Adobe could put malware in there. So it has a sample report, and I'd like to believe, it's irritating me that this one box is off. Sorry, I can see it. I'm freaking out about it. But the reality is that that PDF, I think, tells you what the vulnerability is. I think it does a good job of explaining what SQL injection is. I think it does a good job of saying, here's where you find SQL injection in your application, right? And yet, time and time and time again, luckily not the majority of our tests, we'll talk to a developer and they'll say, okay, I fixed the problem, and then we'll find a way to break what they fixed, right? The example I always give, because it's happened multiple times, is we find something like SQL injection and we tell them, look, here is a payload that works, single quote or 1 = 1 semicolon dash dash space. And that payload injected in dumped your database. That's bad. So fix it. And the way you fix it is parameterized queries, right? And then we'll go for a retest because they fixed the problem. And we'll go to the vulnerability and we'll type tick or 1 = 1 semicolon dash dash space, and it won't work. And then we'll put 2 = 2. Because for the people on this call, I know you know that 1 = 1 is not a magic string. 1 = 1 is a tautology. It's a self-evidently true statement. It just means that both sides of that are true at all times. 1 always equals 1, even if you print one really big and another one in Sharpie, okay? But 2 = 2 is also true. And the payload works just the same. And so if you didn't pay attention to the remediation, if you didn't pay attention to what the explanation of the problem was, you just assumed that 1 = 1 was a bad string, then you're not going to actually fix the problem. We also see quite often, we just had a customer get really, well, it wasn't a customer. They hired a third-party development company. We did a test for them. They failed. And now I want to be very clear, our penetration tests are not pass-fail, okay? But this penetration test was so god-awful bad that I don't know another way to put it. And we said to them, man, this is awful. Like, and so we stopped the test. We actually stopped the test and said, you're not ready for this pen test. You're not. This is just throwing your money away. And while I am a greedy capitalist, I don't want you to just throw your money away. I mean, if you're going to throw it away, please throw it away toward me. But so we stopped the test. We sat down with the development team and we explained what we were seeing. We talked to them about where the problem was. And we said, look, we tested for a day. That's it. It was a 5-day test. We tested for a day. We pulled the plug. We done. Stop. Okay, Kevin, yeah, we got it. And they come back about a month later, maybe 2. And they said, okay, we're ready. We got it. Oh man, Kevin, it's so great. We fixed everything. We're completely secure now. Now, I want to be very clear. The minute you tell me you're completely secure, I start to giggle. I also start to worry about the report, because I know that report is going to be huge, because you're going to have so many vulnerabilities because you're claiming to be secure. But okay, we'll ignore that. And so we go in there, and sure enough, some of the examples we had given them, they had fixed. Now, they had not fixed all of them. And when we pushed them on that, like, hey, this doesn't appear to be touched. Oh, yeah, we ran out of time. Okay, but you said you were, okay, fine. Never mind. But then we start realizing that what they had done is they had fixed exactly the vulnerability we told them about. They didn't understand. And I want to be very clear, we pulled the plug on the test. We made it very clear to everybody. We were pulling the plug on the test, right? We had not completed a comprehensive test. They fixed exactly what we told them was wrong, not the fundamental problems that we had told them were the issue, okay? And so we went back to them and we said, hey, what's going on here? Like, you haven't done this. And they came back and said, well, but Kevin, you didn't list those other things as problems. Well, what do you mean we didn't list those other things as problems? Well, you told me about the authentication bypass on the login form, but you didn't tell me that you could access things other than the main page. And I said to the person I was talking to, who's the lead architect, the lead developer for this third-party company, that I wish I could tell you who you are so they could never hire them in their entire organizational life, because they were awful. And I said to the guy, I'm like, dude, I say dude way too often. I'm like, dude, we told you that your authentication and authorization system didn't. It just didn't, right? That I could access through it without any hesitation. And he said, yeah, but you told us you could get to the main page. I said, no, I told you that everything we tested did not perform authentication and authorization checks. And the guy said, yeah, but your example was the main page. I'm like, yes. You know the definition of the word example, right? Oh, wait, I guess you don't. It was an example. But we told you that your system was broken. Your system didn't do anything. Your system was fundamentally flawed, whatever phrase we want to come up with. He didn't understand that. So they didn't fix anything other than the exact example we gave them, okay? And part of me is hesitant to use this as an example because we hadn't even generated a real report because we hadn't finished the test, right? The other thing we have to talk about is reality. And I hesitate to talk about this one because a lot of people are like, oh, but Kevin, don't you understand? No, maybe I don't. But what I find is that we exaggerate a lot. The biggest flaw to hit the world ever. Internet of Things is going to destroy us. The latest example that I can think of, and I am sure that if I dig a little bit further, I'll find newer ones, but the coffee machine hit by ransomware. Now, I want to be very clear. I'm sorry, I'm totally blanking on the guy's name that did this work. I apologize to the person. I just don't remember the name. But just over a month ago, the news started bringing up, this is a screenshot of Forbes.com. Notice I have 1 of 4 free articles now used. But I didn't even notice that was on the bottom of the screenshot when I took it. That's awful. I'm cheap. But this was actually pretty neat, a pretty neat attack. It was a pretty neat proof of concept. The person found a coffee machine that was smart, right? I'll be blunt, I don't want a smart coffee machine. Why? Because I don't want any risk that somebody's gonna mess up my ability to get coffee. Critical. But he realized that what he could do is he could take apart this machine and he could insert stuff. He could run code on the coffee machine, including ransomware. And he could hijack the patching process possibly and do this and everything else like that. And it went nuts, bonkers. Okay. Oh man, IoT is failing. Like, but it's a coffee machine. Like this is not a widespread attack. This is not something that is going to cripple healthcare, which we can rant about that in a second also, right? I did on the podcast last week with Tom Eston. But we see this attention to interesting attacks. And let me be very clear, ransomware running on my coffee machine would piss me off. And as such, it's critical that we fix it. But the reality is, it did not need to be on CNN. It did not need to be on the BBC. I didn't need to get phone calls from customers worried about the coffee pot ransomware threat. And yes, I got those calls, just like I got calls for the teapot that was broken into a decade ago. We see this waste of people's time. And I don't mean the work to see if ransomware would do it. I mean the attention and ridiculous clickbait articles that talk about it. And security builds it up. We encourage more and more attention to these things, yet we're not fixing fundamental problems. Users are still clicking links. Why? Not because they're stupid, but because technology and security have developed the systems to require them to click the links. How many of you do a user awareness training class every single year? Probably most, if not all of you. How many of you who are responsible for running those classes send out an email with a link that the user clicks on to take the class that tells them not to click links? We don't understand the reality of what we're fighting against. We have not looked at what the systems really are vulnerable to and which vulnerabilities matter. And I can prove it because I will tell you right now, PCI is still failing people over SSL self-signed certificates. We're still making, oh man, you're running TLS 1.1, critical finding, you fail, even though I have for decades asked people for examples of real world breaches that were caused because somebody ran SSL 3.0. And I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm saying I've never found them. I've never been given them, and I've asked forever. We yell at people for SSL configs of their printers and ignore the fact that they're running Windows 7. We ignore the fact that they have Active Directory and SMB exposed to the internet, but oh my God, SSL. By the way, every single one of those is real examples from tests we've done. We have to understand the reality of what we're doing, and we have to be honest about what we're talking about. And then the last thing is understanding goals. We have to understand that not everybody has the same goal we do. Now, in some cases, the goals are similar. We all want a job. We all want to retire well. We all want to have fun and good times and be happy and be with our loved ones. But what are the goals of security? Well, in many cases, is to be secure. And what's funny about that goal is we're never going to accomplish it. The idea that somebody is 100% secure is so laughably ludicrous that when I hear companies say to me, that's our security goal, I recognize the fact that this is going to be a difficult engagement. Because we go back to reality and understanding, right? And obviously we failed to communicate the idea that you can't be 100% secure. Technology has a completely different goal, right? Security wants to be secure. They want to protect the data, protect access, protect the systems. They want to do the right thing. And don't get me wrong, that's awesome. Do you know what IT's goal is? Uptime. That's why SLAs exist. 99.999. Yeah, right. Right? IT wants to be available. They want it to be running. And I always find it funny that security always seems to forget that A is part of the CIA triad. Availability is just as important in the triad as confidentiality and integrity. Now, the use case, the example at the business, the exact scenario, those three change based on the goals of who? The business. That's the one everybody else should be paying attention to, right? And bluntly, technology gets that better than security does in many, many cases. And I would argue that that's because technology has been beat over the head by it for years, and security somehow lives in this ivory tower that we don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. Oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm security. We got to do this. I don't care about the business goals. You understand, right? I love it. I have this argument on Twitter every once in a while because, that's the best place to have arguments, right? SMS two-factor authentication is fundamentally broken and should be recommended against every single place. And if you're working with an organization that's using SMS two-factor authentication, you should burn in hell. That's what we hear on Twitter. The reality is, in my opinion, that in the vast majority of cases, the vast majority of organizations, SMS two-factor authentication is better than nothing. It's better than what they had. And it's a step in the right direction. But as long as we yell from the mountaintops, ah, you plebe running SMS two-factor authentication, do you not understand their goal? Their goal is to build a system that works with the people they need to work with. Because here's the funny part about SMS two-factor. And I don't remember the exact statistic, but you know that 83.5% of all statistics are made up on the spot. Something like 80% of the cell phones worldwide don't support running applications on them. They can't run Google Authenticator. They can't run Authy. What they can do is receive an SMS text. So if we tell them that their only choice is to upgrade their phone, they're not going to do it. They're going to turn off two-factor. And if your business is to work with people that are worldwide, I went down to Miami and I spoke at an event last year that was talking about the unbanked, which was a term that at the time I had not heard. And it was fascinating. I sat at this conference. I want to be very clear. That wasn't what I was speaking on. I was speaking on security. But I sat at this conference and I heard all these things about working with the unbanked. And these are people who just, for a variety of reasons, don't have bank accounts. They don't have access to the stuff that I take for granted. I don't even think about. Put on a credit card. Transfer money. Do this. I'm going to go to the bank and deal with that. I don't have to go to the bank. I got it on my phone. I can transfer money this way. But the unbanked doesn't have access to that. And as security, we should be paying attention to the fact that our organization may be working in that market. And if they are, then decrying SMS two-factor authentication as horrible and bad and shouldn't be there is probably not the right thing for us to do. And it's because we've lost sight of what the business's goals are. Because the business's goal is not to be secure. That's not their goal. They want to be secure. They want to be as secure as they can be. Their goal is to do business. Do we understand that? So how do we fix it? Well, I think there's three things to talk about. We have to be honest. I want to be very clear. That's a big one to me, right? If you're not being honest, then nothing else matters. Right? So that's core. It really should be the bottom of the pyramid, but it's the order I did them in. Let's go with it, right? But we have to be honest about what we're talking about. We have to be honest about what the risk really is. And let's be very clear that if we're not understanding the actual risk, it doesn't matter how well we're honest if we don't understand it, right? We have to communicate well. And something I struggle with is remembering that communication is mostly listening. I've always heard God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, because you're supposed to listen twice as much as you speak. I would argue you probably should listen more than that. Talk to people. Recognize that we shouldn't have called it talking. We should be hearing people, listening to people. If you're a security person or a business person or an IT person, I don't care, but especially security people are the ones I'm yelling at right now. Have you gone to the staff meetings of the groups you work with? Have you gone to the staff meetings of the groups in your organization that you have nothing to do with? Have you ever reached out to HR and said, hey, I got an idea. How about I come to your morning meeting, not to present, not to talk about security, but to hear what you're worried about, to hear what you're working on day to day? If you're an AppSec guy, have you gone and talked to the developers and found out, no, again, not to tell them why you're important and why your security is so critical, but understand what she's working on, hear what she's working deadlines for, what they are dealing with every day? Did you sit with them and find out? And are we communicating, or are we talking at people? Because we talk at lots of people. We really do. We see it all the time. You know, I got an idea. Let me rant on Twitter about it. Let me send an email. Let me post it on our internal SharePoint, whatever. We talk at people constantly. And I'm not saying that the posters telling people not to click links are a waste of time. They're a waste of time. I'm not saying the poster talking about the OWASP ASVS is a bad idea. But we need to stop talking at people. We need to start communicating, okay? So we've got a few more minutes, I believe, for the time. I'm gonna try to get switched over to Discord to see if there's questions and stuff like that. Jumping around, I'm sorry. Wasn't even in the right channel, that's great.
I didn't see any questions, Kevin.
Okay, good. And I'm glad to see that the images were killing somebody. Gone from seconds.
That's me, actually, and they were painful in times.
Good, good. Okay, so I said that I wasn't going to mention it, but nobody has commented on Chewy.
Oh, he's spectacular.
No.
Oh, I can't see it from here. He's got on a blue shirt.
I purposely bought a Star Trek shirt, and we put it on Chewy this morning.
That's terrible.
So...
just reading the title, oh my goodness, there's Bill. And Bill, did you miss you? Nothing.
Use the Force, Harry.
Captain Picard. That's terrible. Your talk is very timely, though. I don't know if you were on earlier when I was talking. I've moved from security into a CISO role, a Director of Information Security, in a Fortune 1000. It's a different tool set.
Yes.
I don't do PowerShell anymore. And in fact,
you do PowerPoint.
I do PowerPoint. Exactly what I said. I said I'm trading in PowerShell for PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Most programming I'm going to do is Power BI to generate metrics, but not operational metrics. And it's killing my head. I don't communicate well.
I'm so sorry.
In that board level, because I'm like, how do I convince them that this is the right thing? And I'll tell this story real quick because we only got a couple of minutes. I used to be a director of IT at a law firm, and it plays directly into your slides. I got asked the question, I want to put my laptop on the wireless network. And what did I say?
No. Yeah.
He asked me a question, but it wasn't what I didn't understand why. I didn't take the moment to ask why.
Yes.
He just understood I went on the network, and I said, no, you can't be on the network. That's a policy violation.
Yep.
Instead of asking him,
why? Exactly.
And now I have to go back and go, no, what are you trying to achieve? Well, I want to get updates so I can check my bank account and so on and so forth. So I'm like, oh, so you went on the guest network, not the internal network.
Yep. And that's a great example, and we see it all the time. And like I said at the very beginning, I'm as much at fault for doing this type of stuff as anybody else is, right? I hear what I think they mean, and I respond to that, right? Not what they asked. And I hope that people enjoyed the talk, even if the pictures were like nails on a chalkboard.
I gotta go find some of those though.
They're so much fun. They're so much fun. All you need to do, if you have any questions, drop me an email at kevin@secureideas.com, or you can follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever, and I'd love to hear from you all.
Absolutely. Really appreciate your time and the talk and your 501st participation. That's actually how we met. I met you. You were in a clone trooper outfit at DerbyCon, I believe. Yep.
Yes. I don't have that clone trooper anymore. I sold him.
And not to me, which is probably an oversight.
Did you ask for it?
No, I did not. So
no, I sold it.
I wouldn't assume anything that spectacular would be for sale.
But well, in this case, I wanted to do some other stuff. I wanted to build Chewie, and so I basically sold him for what I bought him for. Most of the time, the costumes are not for sale outside of the org. Very rarely will you see an actual. There are people who make them. The guy that made my so I made with Doug, a guy here. He helped me. We made everything from here down. The mask I bought from a guy in Ireland, and that guy sells full costumes, but they're more expensive than I think they range about 7,000 for the full, and I built him for 1,500. So
I am working on a BB-8 with a 3D printer because my 12-year-old is
nice.
He is that doesn't fall far from the tree apparently. So
awesome. Well, let me let you guys get back to the next speaker. I'm not sure how that all works.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. And you have a spectacular afternoon. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Bye.